Chapter 1. Blackwood Manor. Ravenmoor always smelled like wet wood and secrets after dusk. The fog came off the water in slow curls, pooling in the gutters, wreathing the crooked lampposts, making the town square look like it was being erased and redrawn at the edge of night. If you listened, you could hear the ocean arguing with the cliffs, the moan of a foghorn, and, if you believed the old stories, the soft scratch of a pen somewhere no living person was writing. I told myself I wasn't the kind of girl who got spooked by a draft or a story. And then I pushed open the side door of Blackwood Manor, and the house breathed out against my face like something that had been holding its breath for 100 years. The door didn't so much open as sigh. Hinges complained. A shower of paint flakes drifted down and clung to my cardigan. I stood there for a second with my hand on the doorknob, listening. The neighborhood around the manor was a blackout patch of town. No one lived this close to the cliffs anymore, not since the storms pulled the old lighthouse into retirement. Across the road, the iron fence of the cliffside cemetery was a dark comb against the sky. Every few seconds, a raven on the gate lifted and resettled its wings, sending a tremor through the fog. My phone buzzed. "Naomi, tell me you're not inside that haunted shoebox." I bit back a smile and slid it back into my pocket. The smile was an automatic reflex whenever Naomi texted in that panicky best friend voice, like she could ward off trouble by spelling it out. 5 minutes, I whispered into the dark, to the house or to myself. In and out. Blackwood Manor's kitchen was the first room you stepped into if you slipped through the side door. It still had the bones of something grand. Enormous farmhouse sink, glass front cabinets with curling brass handles. But the glass was spidered with cracks and the sink was a shallow puddle of rainwater and dead moths. Ivy had pried 2 window frames open and threaded itself inside like a thief. Every surface wore a fur of dust, except near the back where a path had been cleared from door to hall. Footprints? I leaned down, my heart hitching, then exhaled. Not shoes. Raccoon tracks, tiny hands pressed into the ash of a forgotten fireplace. My phone buzzed again. "Naomi. Selene, I swear if I have to go in there I'm bringing a megaphone and a priest." Me found the door open already. "I'll be quick." "Naomi. Quick like last time you borrowed a library book for a month?" Me, that book was lonely. Her typing bubble pulsed, then disappeared, then came back like a glitching heartbeat. I pocketed the phone before she could talk me out of this. I didn't come to Blackwood Manor because I liked breaking rules. I came because Mr. Hargrove's class had opened a door in my head I couldn't close. Local folklore, he'd said last week, wire-rimmed glasses slipping down his nose as he balanced 3 books and a cup of coffee on one hand. Isn't just ghost stories you tell to scare children. It's the way a town remembers. And the way it forgets. At the end of the lecture he'd written a single date on the board. October 17, 1911. Evelyn Blackwood, he'd said almost gently. Drowned. Or didn't. He layered the facts like brittle paper. Blackwood wealth gone sour. A storm that didn't make sense. A body that washed ashore without a ring the family swore should never have left her finger. And then the letters. The ones that, depending who you asked, were evidence of a love affair or bait on a hook. He'd refused to say more. "Some things you go and read for yourself," he'd said, eyes flicking to me as if he knew exactly how that invitation would itch later. Floorboards complained under my boots as I moved down the hall. The manor smelled like damp, like candle wax that had been snuffed and forgotten, like something floral gone sad. Roses my brain supplied. My eyes adjusted to the dark in slow drips. Wallpaper peeled in long tongues, revealing oldest layers, green ivy, then silver stripes, then a pattern of tiny blackbirds I didn't want to look at too closely for fear they'd start to move. I passed a tarnished mirror and my own reflection startled me. Cardigan too big, hair scooped up with strands stubbornly escaping, ink on my thumb from where my pen exploded earlier in AP English. I looked like myself and also like the shadow of a girl who belonged here a century ago. A cool draft licked the inside of my wrist. I pulled my sleeves over my hands and kept going. The parlor opened like a mouth. Once upon a time there had been a chandelier. Now there was only the iron spine of it, crystals missing like teeth. A fireplace gaped. The marble mantel swirled with gray veins that ran together like river maps. On the far side of the room, beneath a window that thought about being a bay and then gave up halfway, stood a writing desk. It was the only thing that looked placed. Everything else had slumped where it was abandoned. Chairs kneeling in prayer, a picture frame face down as if in shame. But the desk sat perfectly square, the chair tucked in as if someone had finished a letter and left only to fetch sealing wax. The air prickled along my neck. "Okay," I said quietly, a voice for prowling cats in old houses. "I see you." I crossed to the desk. The wood was dark and glassy under the dust. When I brushed at a corner, the dust came away in a soft sheet and caught the light that wasn't there. The drawers were stubborn at first, then shrugged themselves open, empty, and then, third drawer down on the right. Something tapped when my fingers wrapped the bottom. I froze, listening. The house answered with a long, aching creak like a sleeper turning in bed. I pressed my palm flat. A false bottom. Mr. Hargrove's voice unspooled in my head. "Some things you go and read for yourself." I fished in my hair for a bobby pin, metal cool against my tongue as I bent it straight. The pin complained in the slot between wood and wood, then slid, then caught on something that gave with a click so satisfying it made my stomach do a ridiculous flip. The panel lifted. Inside, bundled and tied with a strip of black ribbon, lay a stack of envelopes. 10, 12. The paper had gone the color of tea, edges furred from time. The top envelope's wax seal had cracked but clung like dried blood. My hand hovered over them, not touching, the way you hover your hand over a stove you aren't sure is off. Cold radiated up anyway. The smell of roses stronger. The top envelope had writing on it. The ink had feathered, but the words were still readable, the way a whisper is legible in a quiet room. "Whoever reads this will fall in love and die in 30 days. My throat clicked on a swallow. "Cute," I heard myself say, trying for a scoff and landing softer. A chill threaded my spine. I didn't believe in curses. I believed in the way ink can change a person if they let it. I believed in stories. I believed in my own curiosity like it was a saint I lit a candle for. But the words did something to the air. It went thin. It went tight. My phone buzzed like a bee trapped in my pocket. "Naomi, Selene. 3 minutes. I'm not joking. The fog looks like soup and I can't see the road. Also, something just moved in the cemetery and I am a friend, not a ghost hunter. Me found something. Naomi. Leave it for the historian, you gremlin. Me, historians are just thieves with citations. Naomi. I'm printing that on a shirt. After you get out." A floorboard popped behind me. I didn't jump. I did turn slowly, every nerve in my skin staring into the room with me. The parlor was empty in the way things are empty when you don't want to look at the corner. The chandelier's iron ribs shrugged. A lace curtain lifted and dropped as if someone had just set it down. At the edge of my vision, the mirror over the mantel collected the room and showed it back to me with a slight delay. In it, I was still reaching for the drawer. In it, there was a flicker behind me. A girl at the window, black dress spilling like ink, hair heavy and wet, skin so pale the veins had turned into a map. She lifted her head like she heard her name. I spun around. The window offered the yard, ivy, a fat, bored raven, the drip and hush of fog. No girl. When I looked back at the mirror, it was only me. "Okay," I said again, but my voice didn't sound like a cat anymore. It sounded like someone who had just remembered she was inside a story with rules she didn't write. I slid the top envelope free. It made a faint, sad sound where it had stuck to its sisters. The ribbon coiled back like a black snake, then settled. The envelope was heavier than I expected, the paper thick and toothy. The wax seal had a symbol impressed in it, a circle with a raven's head and a thorny ring of roses. I brushed a thumb across it. The wax flaked, but the raven stayed. 30 days, I whispered because I couldn't not. Saying it made it. Saying it made it sound like a dare. Saying it made the number put its feet down in my chest and wait. I didn't break the seal. I didn't even lift the flap. Even I knew better than to read a thing that told you what reading it would do. But I did what I always do when I find words that hum with their own electricity. I stole them. I slid the envelope inside my cardigan, under my shirt, where it warmed against my skin and made me think of something I didn't have a name for. A breath pressed the fine hairs along my arms to attention. "Evelyn," I said, because sometimes talking to a name is easier than talking to a house. The house answered with the crackle of old wood settling and, faint and far away, the sound of water hitting water. For a weird second, the parlor smelled like cold rain and the kind of perfume you find on the sleeve of a coat that's been in the closet since before you were born. I looked back at the drawer. There were more. Some seals broken, some whole. The ribbon had been tied and retied 100 times, the knot learning the shape of fingers that weren't mine. My fingertips itched with the urge to count them, to read the names on the fronts, to trace the loops and slashes of the hand that had written them. Evelyn's if you believed the stories, or someone else's if you believed the town. My phone buzzed with such insistence it sounded angry. Naomi, Selene Carter. Me, coming. Naomi, I have goosebumps on my goosebumps. Please do not make me be the girl in the horror movie who says, Selene, and then gets eaten by fog. Me'd fight the fog and win. Naomi, flattered. Leave. I slid the drawer shut. For a second I thought I felt resistance, like fingers on the other side holding it open, then it closed with a neat little click. The room didn't relax exactly, but it stopped staring so hard. I backed away, the envelope a hot cold rectangle against my ribs, and found my way down the hall by the map of creeks I'd made on the way in. At the kitchen door I paused. A faded photograph had been tacked to the wall so long ago the tack had rusted. I lifted it, careful. A girl looked back at me from the shore. Not just any shore, our cliffs, the lighthouse behind her a white ghost. She wore a dark dress and a thin-lipped smile that wasn't quite a smile at all. She held a letter like some girls hold flowers. The light had burned her eyes almost white. Evelyn Blackwood, I said softly, testing the name against my teeth. The photograph trembled under my fingers, or my fingers trembled against it. Either way, I pinned it back carefully and stepped out into the fog. The air outside felt like a wet hand over my mouth. Naomi stood on the road with her arms wrapped around herself, her curls tucked into a beanie like an apology to the damp. When she saw me, everything in her loosened by increments. She scolded me with her eyebrows first and then with her mouth. You were in there for 9 minutes, she said. 9. I counted with my soul. I found something. I couldn't help the way my voice did that upturn thing like a kid with a contraband cookie. No, she said immediately, backing up a step like I'd held out a live grenade. We are not bringing haunted junk into the Honda. It's not junk, I said, hugging my cardigan closed because the envelope felt suddenly private. It's a history. Aha, she said, cutting her eyes at the cemetery as if history might be eavesdropping. So is the plague. Doesn't mean I want it in my car. A raven dropped from the cemetery gate and coasted low over the road, a silent piece of moving shadow. It perched on the manor's dead rose arbor and looked at us with one mad eye. Naomi glared back like she had beef with the entire bird population of Ravenmoor. Let's go, she said. It's getting thicker. She meant the fog, but her voice made it sound like she meant the curse around my shoulders. We cut across the square on the way home because I always did, even if it was out of the way. The fountain sat stubbornly in the middle, its stone raven glistening with wet. The hollow cup still had lights on. Through the windows I could see Alexis wiping down the counter with the glassy, absent look people got after a whole day of listening to other people's problems. The old library loomed down the block, big as a church, lamps in a few windows making little islands of gold in the gray. Mr. Hargrove's silhouette maybe hunched over a table in the archives. I told myself to go in tomorrow. Ask about 1911. Ask about Blackwood. Ask about why my ribs felt like someone had tucked a clock under them and wound it tight. At home, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and my mother's tired. She worked nights sometimes at the clinic, and when she did, she cleaned like the only way to keep sleep from swallowing you whole was to rub the counters until they shone. She wasn't home now. A note leaned against a salt shaker. Leftover soup in the fridge. Don't stay up too late writing. Love you. I stood at the kitchen table and took the envelope out like a magician, revealing a rabbit I wasn't sure I'd actually pulled from a hat. The light over the table hummed. The paper shivered in the draft that crawled under the window, a draft I had never noticed this house having before. I traced the seal again, raven and thorns. Ink had bled in places, tiny black veins flowering where the pen had been too generous with its heart. Whoever reads this will fall in love and die in 30 days. My name wasn't on the envelope. No one's was. That made it feel like a doorway for anyone. That made it worse. My thumb found the edge of the flap. It would be easy. One small pressure, a crack, the sensation of wax giving up, the world bending to admit the thing I had chosen. In the hum of the kitchen light, I thought I heard something else. A faint scratch, like a pen consoling paper with the truth. Or like a nail against wood from the inside of a drawer. My phone buzzed, breaking whatever spell had wound around my fingers. Unknown number. Your package has been delivered. Reply stopped to. I laughed, a dumb bark that bounced off the window and came back smaller. The envelope didn't laugh. The envelope waited. I took a breath and slid it into my journal instead, between a page of half poems and a grocery list my mother had slipped into my backpack last week. The journal made a tidy rectangle around it and pretended to be enough. I put the journal in my backpack, zipped it, slung the backpack over the chair. The chair creaked like a stagehand stepping back into the wings. By the time I got upstairs, I felt silly, like I'd thrown a party for a superstition and no one had come. I brushed my teeth. I studied the spot of ink on my thumb, which refused to scrub away, and told myself it was just ink. I texted Naomi a goodnight heart and she sent back a row of black ones like an inside joke with the dark. I lay down and watched my ceiling and didn't think about water or girls with wet hair, or the number 30 pacing back and forth along my ribs like it had found a home there. Somewhere in Ravenmoor, the fog climbed higher on the cliffs. Somewhere in the old library, a lamp burned in the archives and then went out. Somewhere I refused to picture, the sea took a bite out of the shore and spit it back up with a sound like a soft, satisfied sigh. And somewhere, at the bottom of a drawer, a ribbon loosened, as if something that had been tied for a very long time was preparing to be untied again. I fell asleep telling myself stories about how the curse wasn't real. In the morning I would bring my backpack to school. And a clock I couldn't hear yet would already have started. Chapter 2, 30 Days. The letter came with me to school like a secret folded under my ribs. It rode in the pocket of my journal, which rode in the bottom of my backpack, which thudded against my chair leg every time I shifted in homeroom. I kept telling myself I wasn't thinking about it, but the truth was I couldn't stop listening for it, like the paper had a pulse that beat just out of sync with mine. Naomi caught me staring into space 3 times before the bell even rang. "You look haunted," she said, plopping her iced coffee onto my desk like it was an exorcism tool. And not in the cute Victorian way. Haunted, haunted. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "You're lying," she sang. Then lower, "It's that house, isn't it? Selene Carter, you did not bring back cursed junk." Her green glitter eyeliner flashed when she narrowed her eyes. "I didn't," my voice cracked. "I mean, technically I didn't read it. So it doesn't count. That's like saying you technically didn't eat the cookie because you only licked the frosting," she hissed. I opened my mouth to argue, but the classroom door creaked open, and every conversation in the room rearranged itself around the boy who walked in. Adrian Vega. He wasn't new, he'd been here since freshman year, but he carried himself like someone who hadn't decided if he belonged anywhere. His denim jacket was frayed at the cuffs, his chain glinted in the strip of light slanting across the desks, and his hair looked like he'd run out of patience halfway through fixing it. Normally he walked straight to the back row, slid into his seat and disappeared like fog into fog. But this time, his eyes flicked to mine. Not just a flick. They stayed. Something tightened under my ribs. My face went hot like I'd been caught whispering his name in church. "Don't," Naomi muttered, following my line of sight. "Don't you dare." "I'm not," I started. But then he smiled. Not the crooked grin he saved for teachers he wanted to annoy, or the polite lift of his mouth when teammates nodded at him in the hall. This one was softer. Sharper. Like he already knew me. And my heart did something it had absolutely no business doing. It stuttered. By lunch, the whole day felt tilted. Everywhere I went, Adrian was already there, leaning against the lockers, waiting by the cafeteria door, even cutting across the quad like his path was magnetic and I was north. Naomi noticed. "Okay," she said, stabbing her salad with the kind of fury reserved for TV villains. "Either you secretly saved his life over the weekend, or he's acting like a guy in one of those swoony paranormal dramas you pretend not to read." I pretended not to hear her. The truth was worse. Bez tucked in my bag, the letter waited. And every time his gaze found me, I swore I felt the wax seal warming through the canvas like it approved. History class after lunch was the kind of slow death that usually had me doodling margins full of moths and broken clocks. But today Mr. Hargrove shuffled papers at the front of the room and cleared his throat in that gravelly, listen closely way he did when something mattered. "October 17th, 1911, he said, chalk squealing across the board. The date from last week. Evelyn Blackwood's date. A shiver spidered up my arms. "An unsolved drowning," he continued. "One of many in Ravenmoor's history. Some say she slipped. Some say she was pushed. Some say she wrote herself into the sea. Naomi shot me a look like, "Don't you dare breathe weird right now." And then, Mr. Hargrove said, voice dropping, "There were the letters." A whisper rippled across the class. I froze. "What letters?" someone asked. "Supposedly," Mr. Hargrove said, leaning against the desk, "she left behind notes. Dozens of them. Words full of longing, promises, curses. Depends on who you ask. But every generation since, those who claim to find them." He paused long enough for the room to lean forward. "Don't last long." His eyes swept across us like headlights in fog. When they landed on me, my throat closed. Adrian's chair creaked as he shifted. His eyes, hazel flecked like gold under storm clouds, found mine again. And for a moment, it felt like Mr. Hargrove's story wasn't history at all. It was right here. Right now. After school, Naomi cornered me by the bike racks. "Spill," she said. "Because Adrian Vega does not look at people like that. Not even his own reflection." I hugged my backpack to my chest. The letter pressed back like a heartbeat. "It's nothing," I said. "You're the worst liar," she snapped. Then softer, "Selene, don't play with this. If those letters are real, if they're hers, you could have started something you can't stop." I wanted to tell her she was being dramatic, that it was just a piece of paper, just ink and wax and dust. But when I glanced over her shoulder, Adrian was still there, leaning against the hood of his car, eyes locked on me like I was the only word he wanted to read. And my stomach dropped because some part of me already knew the truth. I hadn't started something. Something had started me. Chapter 3, Echoes. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Adrian Vega staring at me like I was the last person left in the world. It wasn't the normal kind of stare either, not the "oh, she dropped her pen" type. It was too steady. Too sure. Like he already knew something about me I didn't even know about myself. And yeah, maybe I dreamed about the letter glowing in my backpack like it was alive. Maybe I dreamed about the girl in the mirror too. But I wasn't about to admit that out loud. By the time I met Naomi outside school the next morning, I had bags under my eyes and an attitude. She took one look at me and groaned. "Selene, no. Don't even say it." I didn't say anything. "You didn't have to. You look like somebody who read the Necronomicon at 2 a.m. and then tried to pretend they're fine." She leaned in close, lowering her voice. "This is about him, isn't it?" I shoved my hands deeper into my cardigan. "It's about a lot of things." Naomi made a face. "Selene, I've known you since we were 10. You do this thing where you try to act mysterious, but you're really just screaming on the inside. Tell me I'm wrong." I couldn't. First period dragged, second period was worse. I kept my head down, trying not to let my brain replay every second of yesterday. But the universe wasn't on my side. Because halfway to third period, Adrian Vega stepped right into my path in the hall. "Hey," he said. Just one word. One word, and my stomach flipped like I'd missed a stare. Hey." My voice came out like a question. "Smooth, Selene. Real smooth." His eyes locked onto mine, sharp and golden in the hallway light. "You ever feel like..." He paused, searching for words. "Like you were supposed to meet someone? Like it was written somewhere?" My throat went dry. Behind me, Naomi whispered, "Oh my God," like she was watching a horror movie in real time. I don't know," I said, trying to sound casual, but it came out shaky. Adrian leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I feel like I've known you forever." And that's when it happened. For half a second, his words doubled. Like an echo, but not the kind the hallways make. This echo was softer, almost a whisper, almost feminine. Like Evelyn Blackwood herself had repeated the line just behind my ear. I jerked back, heart racing. Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Adrian asked, eyebrows pulling together. Naomi grabbed my arm, pulling me a step away. "Selene, we're leaving." But Adrian's gaze never broke. He smiled, that same smile from yesterday, the one that felt too heavy for my chest. "See you around," he said. And when he walked away, the echo of his footsteps sounded wrong, like they belonged to more than one person. By lunch I was losing it. Naomi shoved her tray toward me. "Eat something before you pass out. You're pale." "I'm fine." "You're cursed." I glared. "Naomi." "No, seriously." She leaned closer, whispering like the cafeteria was full of spies. "This is how it starts. Creepy stares, whispered voices, ancient letters. Next thing you know, your boyfriend's writing love poems in blood." I pushed her tray back. He's not my boyfriend. Yet. I kicked her under the table. Last period came and I was ready to bolt the second the bell rang. I opened my locker to grab my stuff, and that's when my stomach dropped. Because sitting on top of my books was another envelope. Same faded paper. Same cracked wax seal. Same raven pressed into the red like it was mocking me. And I hadn't put it there. Naomi leaned over my shoulder and gasped so loud half the hall turned. Oh no. Nope. No, no, no. Burn it. Right now. My fingers hovered over the envelope. Cold radiated from it like it had just come in from a snowstorm. My name was written across the front this time. Not Selene. Not Carter. Just one word in dark looping ink. Chapter 4, Whispers in the Dark. The second letter sat on my desk like it had been waiting for me all my life. I'd tried everything. Zipped it inside a makeup bag, shoved that bag under my mattress, even piled a stack of textbooks on top. But when I came home after school, there it was, lying neatly on the wood like it had floated up all on its own. Same cracked wax seal. Same raven pressed in red. I didn't touch it. Not this time. I dropped my bag, backed away like it might grow teeth, and shut the door harder than I meant to. Okay, I muttered, pressing both hands to my face. This is fine. Totally fine. But the house didn't agree. The air felt heavy like I was breathing through water. Shadows in the corners stretched too long, and the steady rain against my window suddenly sounded less like weather and more like fingers tapping glass. I told myself not to cry. I failed. Naomi showed up 2 hours later with a duffel bag, a blanket, and that look on her face that said she wasn't leaving no matter what I said. You're lucky I love you, she announced, dropping everything on my bed. Because this house. Big nope. 0 stars. Would not recommend. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to. Best friend radar. She set her blanket down like she was marking territory. Besides, you think I'm letting you sit here alone while Ghost Barbie plays peekaboo with cursed love notes? Absolutely not. Despite myself, I laughed. Naomi grinned like she'd won. For a while, it almost felt normal. 2 girls scrolling through TikTok, sharing popcorn, complaining about homework. But when the clock pushed past midnight and the candle on my desk burned low, the air shifted. A whisper stirred in the corner of my room. I froze. Naomi's head snapped toward me. Tell me you heard that. My voice came out hoarse. I think so. The candle flame bent sideways as if someone invisible had leaned too close. My skin prickled. We both stared at the desk. The letter seal had cracked on its own. Naomi bolted upright. Nope. No way. We're leaving. But I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on the paper as the corner curled upward, just enough to show the faint slant of handwriting inside. And then, a shadow stirred behind us in the mirror. Not a trick of light, not our reflections. A third figure. Evelyn Blackwood's silhouette, her face lost in fog, but her eyes, dark, endless, watching. Naomi grabbed my hand so tight my bones popped. The whisper came again, layered with rain. Read it. The next morning, I shoved the letter back in my bag like it was venom and dragged myself to school on 2 hours of sleep. Adrian found me before first period. You look tired, he said softly, like he cared. Like he knew. Thanks, I muttered, clutching the strap of my bag like it was a lifeline. He tilted his head, studying me the way people study art they don't understand. Funny thing happened last night, he said. I dreamt I wrote you something. Pages and pages. But when I woke up, he smiled faintly. The words were gone. My stomach lurched, because I hadn't told him about the second letter. And the way he said pages and pages, it was exactly what the cracked letter on my desk had looked like. That night, rain hit harder, rattling the windows like it wanted in. I curled under my blanket, promising myself I wouldn't look. But sometime after 2 a.m. the sound changed. Not tapping. Not rattling. Scratching. I jolted upright. My window was open wide, curtains blowing, rain slicking the floorboards. And on my desk, next to the guttering candle, sat a third envelope. This one sealed in black wax. Chapter 5. Black wax. I tried to do the smart thing. I slid the black sealed envelope into a shoebox under my bed, jammed the shoebox behind another shoebox full of sweaters I never wore, then pushed my bed tight against the wall like I could pin the whole situation in place. For 5 minutes that worked. On minute 6 the house breathed differently. The air got colder in the way a refrigerator does when you leave it open too long. The smell of wet roses threaded up through the floorboards. I stared at the ceiling and counted my breaths until I lost track and all the numbers felt like the same number. 30. I lasted until midnight. Then I dragged the shoebox out by its frayed ribbon handle, sat cross-legged on my floor, and lifted the lid like I was lifting the top off a coffin. Black wax doesn't look like candle wax. It looks like a decision. The seal's raven was raised sharp enough to catch a thumb if you weren't careful. The thorns around it circled tight. The envelope was heavier than the others, like it had more gravity than paper should. I didn't open it. I put it on my desk, on the dry ring stain where mugs had lived and left, and paste. My room reflected me back in pieces. Mirror, window, book spines, the shadow of my plant looking like a hand on the wall. If I listened, really listened, I could hear ink settling in the envelope, the slow shift of words when no one is reading them. My phone buzzed on the pillow. Naomi, still alive? Me define alive. Naomi, breathing? Not reciting Victorian verse in a demon voice? Me, jury's out. Pause. Then, Naomi, I can't come tonight, my mom has me on lockdown after I borrowed the car. Naomi, but I'm here. Call if it does anything worse than sit there and look ugly. My chest pinched in a way that wasn't about the letter. I typed, erased, typed again. Me, it's fine. I can handle it. Naomi, you don't have to handle everything alone, Selene. Naomi, also if your window opens by itself again, I'm calling a church. I put the phone face down. The candle I'd burned low the night before had given up. Only a nub remained, wick a black tear. The room felt too loud with quiet. Okay, I told the envelope. If I open you, it's just reading. Reading is not the same as agreeing. The envelope said nothing. The room leaned in. I slid my thumbnail under the edge of the wax. It was cooler than my skin, then suddenly warm, like it remembered being liquid. The seal gave with a soft crack that hit my body like a sound and a touch at the same time. When I lifted the flap, a whisper ran along the back of my neck. Yes. Inside, thick paper the color of old bone. A hand I recognized without ever having seen it before. Loops and slashes, the kind of script that looks like it could cut you if you ran a finger along it too fast. Selene. It didn't make sense for my name to look the way it felt. Like something being spoken in a chapel. Like a hand over my mouth to keep me quiet. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the next sentence made me remember to breathe. I have been waiting for you. Ink throbbed on the page, not literally, not in a way you could show someone else, but in a way my nerves understood. My eyes pulled themselves along the lines like they were on rails. You think this is about him? It is not. It is about you. He is a door. You are a key. Do you know what a town does when it is lonely? It writes you in its margins until you become the story. Do not be afraid. Fear makes foolish promises. I want something gentler from you. Below the paragraph, the ink had bled in tiny veins, the way water spiders out when it finds a crack. It looked like roses unfurling and dying at the same time. You have already started. You took the first letter. You held it to your skin. You carried me into the light. That is how every love begins. In the dark, in the hands, then into the day. My stomach turned over. You will write me back. The words sat there, simple as a grocery list. They made my palms damp anyway. Absolutely not, I told the room, which is a normal thing to say to an envelope if you're me. I don't even know you. The page didn't care. It went on. You will write because you are already doing it. I went still. At first all I heard was rain worrying the window. Then, under that, another sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I looked down. My pen was uncapped on the desk and I was holding it and I didn't remember picking it up. The nib had traced 3 small, careful lines on the underside of my wrist. Not words. Not yet. The ghost of letters. I dropped the pen so fast it bounced and rolled, leaving a comet tail of ink on the wood. No, I said, to the pen, to the page, to the idea of me as a thing moved by other things. No. The letter's last lines were small, like a whisper slid under a door. What we write is how we live. What we sign is how we end. If you love him, give him the mercy of meaning. If you love yourself, answer me. The signature was not a name. It was a seal, the raven's head again, impressed in ink like a bruise. I put the letter back in the envelope and the envelope back on the desk and the desk back into being a desk by pressing both palms on it and counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 until my heart remembered the trick of not running. My phone buzzed as if it had been waiting for me to finish. Adrian. Couldn't sleep. Weird question. Do you like roses? I stared. Me sometimes. But, Adrian, don't know. Thought I smelled them. Thought of you. The room tilted. I very calmly set my phone down, walked to the bathroom and threw cold water on my face until my skin went numb. When I came back, the envelope had moved an inch closer to the edge of the desk. By morning, Naomi had decided on a strategy called denial but with snacks. She met me at my locker with a paper bag that smelled like cinnamon and a face that said she hadn't slept either. You look like someone did a crime to you, she said, pressing a sugary donut to my chest. Eat. Sugar is protection. That's not science, I said, but I ate anyway because my hands were shaking. What happened? She scanned my face like she was trying to catch lies before they formed. Actually, don't tell me. Just tell me if anything bled, floated, levitated, or sang. Her voice dipped. Did you open it? Yes, I said, because you don't lie to the person who brings you donuts. Selene. It wrote to me. Her jaw worked. Okay. She took a breath like she was tasting smoke in the air. Hey, new plan. We go to Mr. Hargrove. He likes you. He'll know what to do. I can't, I said instinctively. Why? Because, I glanced down the hall. Adrian was there, not looking at me, hands in his pockets, head tipped toward a poster about blood drives like it had told him a secret. Even from here, his presence tugged at me, a thread at my ribs. Because it told me it's not about him. It's about me. Naomi's eyes went soft. Hey, it wants you scared and alone. That's how these things work. We don't have to give it what it wants. A locker banged shut down the hall. The sound echoed long like a bell rung underwater. The lights above us flickered once, twice, then steadied. A girl brushed past and every hair on my arms lifted as if she'd brought winter with her. Ravenmoor had moods. Today it felt like it had a fever. I'll go with you to Hargrove after lunch, Naomi said, decision hardening her mouth. If he starts talking about town memory and oral histories instead of giving us practical advice, I'm stealing his book cart and running him over gently. I laughed too loud. Felt like a good idea and a terrible idea at the same time. Mr. Hargrove looked like he always did. Tie crooked, hair remembering another decade, pockets full of things he'd meant to put somewhere else and then didn't. His classroom smelled like chalk and coffee and something else I couldn't name, an old paper smell that made your brain go quiet. He listened. That was his best thing. He didn't interrupt, didn't make the face adults make when teenagers say words like curse. He steepled his fingers and stared down at a stack of essays as if the essays might chime in. When I said black wax, he glanced up sharply. You've heard of that? Naomi pounced. I've heard stories, he said carefully. Black wax meant the letter had weight. Not just longing. Intention. Whose intention? I asked. He hesitated. Sometimes not the writers. Sometimes the town's. I hated that answer in a way that made my molars hurt. The town. Places keep their own ledgers, Selene. He spoke softly like the town might be listening through the floor. Who goes, who stays, who belongs to whom? When a story wants to be told, it finds mouths. And hands. Is there a way to stop it? Naomi demanded. A spell? Paperwork form? A bonfire? Fire doesn't help, he said, almost apologetic. Paper remembers burning as well as it remembers words. Then what? She snapped. We just let it eat her life. He rubbed his forehead. For a second he looked very, very tired. There are rumors, he said finally, that the first curse, the master letter, wasn't broken by tearing or drowning or flame. It was ended when someone wrote their own last letter. Chose the ending rather than waiting to be given one. The room went unfocused. Somewhere, a fly bumped itself into the window over and over. So right back, I said, hearing how small my voice had gotten. Don't, Naomi said immediately. I'm not saying do, Mr. Hargrove said, palms up. I'm saying what the stories say. Stories aren't instructions. They're maps. Sometimes they show you where not to go. I swallowed around the dry ache in my throat. What if the map only has one road? Then we draw another, Naomi said. She was pale and fierce, like someone who had just decided to go to war with weather. We're not doing this alone. She looked at Mr. Hargrove. You're coming with us. He blinked. Where? The old library archives, she said. Tonight. We're going to find whatever you're not telling us. Mr. Hargrove's eyes slid to me. It gets cold down there, he said, which was not a no. I have sweaters, I said, which was not a yes. After last bell, Adrian was waiting by the steps like a storm cloud pretending to be a boy. Walk you home? He asked like he'd been doing it for years. It's out of your way, I said, which was polite for I might be contagious with ghost. He shrugged. I don't mind. We walked. Ravenmoor's late afternoon through its usual trick. Sun behind cloud, cloud behind fog, fog behind the thin light that makes everything look like a memory. A raven hopped sideways along the cemetery fence, following us the way ravens always follow the wrong sort of people in stories. Adrian shoved his hands deeper into his jacket. When he talked, his voice had that late-day roughness like he'd been quiet too long. Last night I dreamed you were writing, he said. Your hand moved and I couldn't see the words and it felt like drowning and praying at the same time. My mouth went dry. I didst dritte, Elite. He looked at me like he could see the pen marks on my wrist through my sleeve. I keep thinking of a number, he said softly. 30. I stopped walking. He stopped too. Why are you telling me this? I asked. He looked surprised, like he hadn't considered not telling me. Because I don't have anyone else to tell, he said. Because when I think about you it gets quiet. And everything else is loud. The worst part was that it landed in me like a gift. The second worst part was knowing it might not be his to give. I have to go, I said, which was the safest sentence available. He smiled like he forgave me for it. See you, he said, and when he turned toward his street, something in the air loosened, like a knot pulled 2 inches apart. The knot was still there. Night fell like it had been waiting on the stairs. Naomi texted when she slipped out of her house. Mr. Hargrove texted a single grim thumbs-up emoji that made me weirdly fond of him. We were supposed to meet at the library at 9, when Mrs. Kapoor locked the front doors and went home to watch crime dramas and worry about the youth. At 8:30 the rain started again. At 8:31, my window unlatched itself with a sound like a throat clearing. I turned. The curtains breathed in. Cold stepped into the room on silent feet. On my desk, the black-sealed envelope lay open, the letter inside smoothed like it had been ironed by a careful hand. Beside it sat my journal, open to a blank page. My pen rolled toward the edge and stopped with its nib hanging in space, a drop of ink fattening. Don't, I said to myself more than to anything else. Don't. The drop fell and bloomed a small, perfect circle. My hand moved. It wasn't a seizure. It wasn't someone puppeting my fingers. It was worse. It was me choosing to lift the pen because choosing not to felt like stepping off a cliff. The first word wrote itself in my handwriting, which made it hateful. Dear. I yanked the pen away. The line tore, ink screaming across the page. The room flashed colder, like a window opened inside a window. On the envelope, the raven's seal seemed to look up. In the glass of the dark window, my reflection watched me with someone else's eyes. Fine, I said, shaking, furious at the letter, at the town, at whatever it meant to be a girl whose curiosity kept making altars out of tables. You want an answer? You'll get one on my terms. I slammed the journal shut and stuffed it in my backpack. The letter I slid back into its coffin of an envelope, the envelope into my pocket, the pocket against my skin where it burned like winter. I was halfway to the door when the room exhaled. A second sheet of paper lay on the desk that hadn't been there a breath ago. No wax. No seal. Just 4 lines, damp as if the ink hadn't yet dried. What you refuse to write you will speak. What you refuse to speak you will dream. What you refuse to dream he will. Come to the water. I backed away, hit the door with my shoulder and kept going. Outside, Ravenmoor's night pressed wet against my mouth. The library lamps burned like small islands. I ran toward them like a person runs toward fire in winter. Behind me, in my room on my abandoned desk, the pen rolled back to the open journal all by itself. And in the margin where I had written dear, a second hand began very slowly to finish the sentence in my voice.